Here you have a time when you have Native American females and they're required to go to boarding school to learn domesticity. And out of that, you have a Native American doctor.
She was the first Native American doctor, period. What? How did that happen?
She went through racism, but she fought hard because she believed in what she was going to do and to help the people.
She was a strong woman, a very strong woman.
So I'm glad that they recognized Susan, what she done, and showed and proved that anything is possible, that she made it through.
I am fighting for the manhood of my people. I am fighting for those you call incompetent. We are not stones. We are not driftwood. We have feelings, thoughts, hopes, ambitions, aspirations.
And today behind us, we are going to unveil a beautiful sculpture done by Benjamin Victor of Dr. Susan Flesche Picotte, America's first Native doctor. It is my hope that today you take from this event a fond memory and a greater understanding of who Indigenous people are, of our history and culture, and dynamic and vibrant presence in today's world. This is just, like a work in progress.
Okay.
It's the sculpture mock-up.
Oh my, oh wow. That depicts exactly her life, her mission.
It does.
Excellent. Wow. My involvement in all of this was when Judy said, my dream is to have a statue of Susan LaFlesche. But to start that, we need to raise funds. And I looked at Judy and I said, okay, I will be your benefactor. It was because of Joe Starita that first I'd read all about Chief Standing Bear, but then I read Warrior of the People, the story of Susan LaFlesche. I was quite moved by this young woman, and she didn't just do medical, she also helped with religion, and she helped with education. She was in it all the way for everyone. Ben Victor was in the room, and I pointed to Ben and I said, Ben will be the sculptor.
Yeah, I just keep refining it down, little by little. So you'll see the veins and the subtlety of the tendons across your hand. So it really gives it a nice three-dimensional quality. For my career as a sculptor, I've been really blessed to get to do a number of sculptures that involve activists. When I'm depicting an activist, I think it's always appropriate to show them in motion. In her case, it's appropriate from a literal standpoint too, because she was never standing still. She was waking up at 5 in the morning to go out and help people all over the tribal lands that needed help. And she was the only doctor for like hundreds of miles around, so she had to be on the move. And so you can feel that wind swooshing through, and it just gives that dynamic motion into her dress. Yeah, I love doing the hands, all the detail in the hands and face. I really wanted to capture in her face that courage and leadership, but also the positivity that it must have taken to stand against all odds and look out and look ahead and know that what you're doing makes a difference.
This is arguably one of the most interesting American Indian families in history. Susan is the youngest of the 4 girls, but she has these great role models to look up to.
Her father was Chief Iron Eyes, the last chief of our tribe.
Joseph LaFlesche, but he got adopted by Umpatunga, Big Elk. And Umpatunga, Big Elk, saw the good in Iron Eye, and he said, I'm gonna take him as my son. I give my hereditary chieftainship to him. Big Elk told him, I've been back east. I've seen their homes in the big cities. He said, at night, their homes are like the stars in the sky. There's that many of them. They're coming this way. They're coming like a flood. Can't stop it. We have to prepare ourselves. He wanted his kids to survive.
The white men were already here. They were taking over in all kinds of ways. So Because her father was very intuitive into like seeing into the future, having her father as such an influential person in her life on many levels, I think it opened her eyes to be able to really look into the future and see what's going on.
When you start with her father, Chief Joseph, he moved forward and he moved his family forward. He was a leader. And then I think that he showed his children how to do that, each in their own way.
The creation story of the Omaha is so beautiful. What it says is from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, it's about how to care for the people. So if you take that premise and you apply it to Susan's life or apply it to her father's life, it was always about what can I do for the people? That is the core of the Omaha value. If you take that idea and then you look at Chief Big Elk's speech about how to adapt, then you no longer see acculturation, you no longer see assimilation, you see strategy, right? How to strategize, how to move through things, how to maneuver through things. And that is what the LaFlesche family did, and that's what the Omaha people had to do, and that's what Susan did.
When she was quite young, a friend of the family who she really liked got ill, and they had called for the doctor, the white doctor.
I was just a girl when I went to comfort a woman who was very ill. A messenger went for the agency doctor, but he never showed up. The woman died in agony that morning. It was only an Indian, and it did not matter.
He didn't show up, and the next morning she had died. She thought this shouldn't happen, and it shouldn't happen. And that's what made her decide to go to medical school.
This is the article where Susan is saying she found healing easy. She herself said that she was always interested in the Omaha medicine men and medicine women. In Native American cultures, being a medicine man or being a medicine woman, that's not something that's taken lightly. It's not just a profession. I mean, that is a lifelong calling. That's a massive responsibility.
She knew that she was going to head to the East Coast to be able to pursue and get this degree.
It has always been a desire of mine to study medicine, ever since I was a small girl, for even then I saw the needs of my people for a good physician.
It was the height of the Victorian era. The bar for white Christian American women, that bar was set about an inch off the ground. For Native women in the last quarter of the 19th century, there was no bar because Native people were invisible. So for a 20-year-old Omaha Indian woman from an isolated, remote reservation in the middle of nowhere to get on a train and go to Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, and later into the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia, that is a pretty impressive feat.
When she left for Hamden, her and her family, they did not have an idea that medical school would become an option. I think that was an opportunity, and she took it.
She had to be very strong and courageous, and that stubbornness helped her get through that time. I'm sure she was lonely, but she knew what she wanted to do, and that was to get an education and take that back to her people.
I like my studies very much indeed, and don't mind the dissecting room at all. We laugh and talk there just as we do anywhere.
So, she's going through medical school, and then at the same time, she's telling her family, if somebody's sick, have them send me the symptoms, and I'll try to diagnose them from here.
Dear Rosalie, will you please send me the symptoms when someone is ill at home, and I'll see if I can diagnose the case.
To get into that medical school, the only medical college in the world at the time where a woman could become a doctor, not only to get her medical degree, but she graduated #1 in her class, becoming the first Native American, male or female, in the history of her country to get a medical degree 31 years before women could vote, 35 years before Native American people were considered citizens.
After she graduates from medical school and after she becomes a doctor, she makes that choice to come home. She took everything that she learned, just like her siblings, all the skills that they learned, they took it back They indigenized it, they Omahaized it, they all used their skills to help the people.
There's a lot of things that brought me into wanting to be a nurse. My grandfather was sick with a lot of health ailments. I felt personally like a lot of his health issues have been related to a lack of education in the health system, basically. That was the main breaking point for me, is like, I want to help my grandfather. I don't know how. Where can I start? My last semester is preceptorship focused. You're going to be shadowing a nurse, following their schedule. Grandpa always had a smile on his face.
Mm-hmm. And these pictures here is when we were younger. This was back in the 70s. This picture here is Grandma Susan's brother, one of her brothers, Carrie, the Flesche. This one is her other brother, Francis.
My grandpa would always drop my sister and I off in the mornings. He would say, like, all the struggles that I faced, you know, I don't want you girls to go through that. So that's why I tell you girls every day, go to school. I called my mom, I was like, I'm scared. I'm the only Native student here, Mom. Like, I'm only an hour and 20 so minutes away, but I just didn't feel like I fit in. I was struggling the very first, like, half of the semester. And I just had like this moment of doubt in myself. I thought in my mind, like, who can I ask for help? The first person who came to mind was Susan. She went out of her comfort zone, away from home, this college where she was the only Native there. And I'm sure she felt the things that I felt, being lonely. Just asked her, if, you know, you're listening to me now, can you just help me? I just kind of sat there for a moment. And then I just felt like, okay, you know what? I can do this. And I feel like that statue there is definitely gonna bring more attention to her that she deserved. But honestly, I feel like that's just the beginning of her recognition.
It just absolutely brings it alive. I guess it put life in her, you know?
I really like the applique patterns.
Yes. So this is a traditional Omaha applique of what you've done here.
Yes.
Because the tribe
Mm-hmm.
told you about it. Wow.
There's a very famous story of the very first patient. A mother and her young son came, and he had some severe medical problems, and she suggested a very specific course of medicine, and she gave it to the sick boy.
And then the next day, she thought she would go out and check on him to see if he was okay. And so she pulls up to see him splashing in the little pond there with a bunch of kids. So obviously he was okay. First patient when she comes home as a, you know, a physician. And so, you know, like the first time you try something, you know, you jump out of an airplane, you're like, oh yeah, my parachute opened. Okay, it works.
This rapid recovery won for me no end in fame among the Indians. They fairly flocked to me after that.
This is a 24-year-old woman who inherited overnight 1,244 patients scattered across a 1,350 square mile reservation.
Imagine being the only health professional in the area, and she was like the main go-to person.
The Omahas depend on me so, and I just have to take care of myself till this fight is over.
There's one particular day where I was reading about her and I was exhausted thinking about everything that she did. And then she writes noon. So that's everything that she did from just the morning to noon. And then you go through the second part of the afternoon. She would have to travel 8 miles, for instance, to see a patient, and then she'd come home and then she'd have to travel another couple of miles, maybe in a different direction to see another patient. And that was in any kind of weather.
One Indian man came to me and said, We're very grateful to you for coming to see us when we are sick, but we wish you wouldn't go out in stormy weather. It'll be too much for you. I told him I had to, for that was my duty, and he said no more.
It sounded like she was not going to get married until she met Henry. She just fell in love, and he stayed and took care of those 2 little boys.
I do wish you could see the baby. He's so sweet and as fat, healthy, and strong as can be. He has thick black hair, and his brilliant black eyes follow us all over the room. During the first weeks after he first came, his papa stayed up every night and took the entire care of him.
When she had her first son, he was a baby and somebody would come and call on her and say she needs to go and see them. She would have bundled him up and she would have taken him with her.
I moved here when I was 8 years old. It became home to me immediately. When I was young, I was told that she was the first Native medical doctor, and she belonged to our tribe. She influenced me at such a young age, and I would say, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor, just like Dr. Susan Flesche Picotte. This was original. It says, East, West, Hame's best. Basically, no matter where you're at, home is where your heart is, home is the best place. Such an influential person within all Native communities. Her footsteps were here, you know? This is her home. And she laid it for us. She was so ahead of her time, you know? She was against alcohol. She was about mixing Western medicine and traditional medicine.
She comes home and she has this medical training, and then she has this interest in traditional medicine. And, you know, due to the circumstances of what was available to her or not at the time as being the agency physician, she had to combine both.
Indigenous populations have the highest health disparity rate among any other minority population. My grandfather was not one to fully trust somebody in a white coat, which is very understandable considering the maltreatment that our people received. It is a major barrier in the health system. And then that's kind of where they fall back on our cultural practices and their medicines. My grandma and grandpa would always burn sage in the mornings or before I went to bed and smudge us off. Well, they both would tell me when you smudge, you pray. So just like this, when I'm sick or if I'm feeling sad, she would tell me make some sage tea, and pray when you make it. It's a medicine and the Creator gave us this for a reason, so don't abuse it.
Her great-great-great-grandmother used her Indian medicine that when she grew up around here, she used that along with the European medicine as well, but she kept the balance.
Some doctors or some nurses are like, no, you can't take that. That's not going to help you. Versus me, I'm like, no, this is what makes your patients feel comfortable. Learn how to work with it. Having a cultural background and then now being exposed to modern medicine, I understand both. And now I'm learning how to, work with both.
That river's right there at Nishude, the Missouri River. That was the I-29 of the time when the Spanish first came up it, and the French, and then the English. And with it came diseases that reduced their numbers to 200 and some odd people when there was thousands before Columbus. But they call that the disease corridor.
Poverty is a symptom of colonialism, and it's an environment where diseases get spread like that. Whereas she might have had knowledge of herbs and medicines that would help a cold or a flu, you have these bigger diseases now, and the only way that she could help fight those off and keep those away from her people would have been for preventative care.
She taught on good hand washing and all those very basic things that people know about. Then the incidence of infection went down. She was just ahead of her time in so many areas.
I believe in prevention of disease and hygiene care more than I do in giving or prescribing medicine. And my constant aim is to teach these two things: plenty of fresh air and sunshine. That is nature's medicine.
I've always kind of known that this is where I wanted to be. You know, this is home. There's a strong passion to help people because this is a place that really needs it. And as a grassroots person who's born and raised here on this reservation, I understand the type of care that I myself want myself and my family to experience. You know, there's a lot of providers that come and go. You know, people have a lot of comorbidities around here. We have a high rate of diabetes, hypertension, and to have to tell that story over and over and over again becomes frustrating. And you finally find a provider that you really care for and you like, and they leave. Being a provider here, the patients know that I'm from this area, kind of makes them more inclined to want to, one, trust, but two, come back. And, you know, they don't have to keep telling their story over and over.
We're not inherently meant to be sick, and we don't want to, like, traditionally be unhealthy. We have to understand what the variables that are impacting us. We didn't have diabetes before Columbus. We didn't have alcoholism before Columbus. We didn't have meth. It didn't originate here, but it was brought here.
I have rarely seen such a beautiful sight as when standing on the top of a high hill, looking down on a field of harvested wheat. We watched the moon rise, flooding the valley with silver light and casting deep shadows around the trees.
This article was published in Walt Hill Times. She's talking about the stance that the tribe had taken on the policy, trying to get more control of their land, trying to get more control of their resources. Susan says, "I shall always fight good and hard against the department or anyone else against anything that is to the tribe's detriment.
Even if I have to fight alone before my God, I owe my people the responsibility."
She would go and collect rent for a non-Indian person who was leasing land from a tribal member, and, you know, they weren't getting their money, or, you know, anything like that.
She did a lot of different things besides just being a physician. She fought to get more land for other people to have.
She would take a rail car to Washington, D.C., where she would testify in the halls of Congress about the theft of the Omaha Reservation land by greedy whites.
We have rules and regulations to the right of us, to the left of us, behind us. Do you wonder we object to continuation of them in front of us?
She was a doctor, she was a teacher, she was a healer. There was no need that her Omaha people had that she didn't try and fulfill.
One of the greatest present needs among Indians is hospital work.
She always knew that the Omaha needed a hospital. If you look at, you know, medical history, getting a government hospital put on a reservation was just literally impossible.
Incubating inside of her for decades has been this idea, I can't keep fanning out across this huge reservation and treating only 3 patients when influenza is killing my people, when tuberculosis is killing my people, when alcoholism is killing my people. I need to concentrate them in one place.
She was really savvy in terms of how to put together her resources, how to make things happen.
And the reservation hospital gets built.
Stepping out of that comfort zone, being one of the first people to go out and do something that most would not at that time. Regardless of how long she was out there in a different culture, Susan still held on to her ties. She still remembered the tradition. She still honored that. She didn't forget about it. That's how I remember her. That's how my grandmother remembers her, my mother. You know, she was a strong woman.
I bring greetings from my family on this beautiful day. What an honor to be here celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day and the unveiling of the statue of my great-grandmother, Dr. Susan Flesche Picotte. She used her education to further her commitment to helping her community. I'm sure Dr. Susan would be humbled and honored with her statue being placed on Centennial Mall. And I now invite the descendants of Dr. Susan Flesche Picotte to come forward for the unveiling.
All these feelings that I have, all this connection that I have is now in this statue, and it's a long time coming. She's important not only to us here, but to everybody nationally.
Her greatness is just going to be perpetuated now. She's someone to look up to, and if she can do it, we can do it.
Even in her passing, Dr. Susan Flesche continues to inspire. Our young women, her relatives, her descendants continue to work in the medical field and to provide those healthcare services, not only to our people, but to other people in their field.
She always began her letters with, "I'm an Omaha Indian." I always acknowledged myself first as a Lakota, and then I'm a US citizen. Every time I read that, it was like a whisper of strength that was being blown towards me. It was a reaffirmation of who she was, and it was like a reaffirmation for me to be who I am.
She famously kept a lantern on in her home through the night as a beacon for anyone who was feeling ill to go towards that light because treatment was available, hope was available. She has now become that lantern. She's the one that young girls can go to and be inspired by that light and do something because they know Susan did it and they know how important what she did was for all of their people. So that's her legacy. That's what she brings, even in death, in terms of the hope. And the light hasn't gone out. The light is still on.
I shall always fight, good and hard, even if I have to fight alone before my God. I owe my people the responsibility.